Hello, today is September 25th. I'm coming to you direct from Ormond Beach, Florida, and this is the latest edition of the Charles Report. In the news today, in the New York Times, an interesting article about anti-Semitism on the increase in Europe. An interesting article. It shows you how easily confused people can be in these backward places such as Europe. Um, Shocking stuff. Synagogues bombed in Germany and elsewhere. But a lot of this seems to dovetail into the support for the Palestinian cause and the large numbers of Muslims in these countries in Europe, and it's kind of it's a fascinating read that just shows you how confused and disoriented the masses are, not only in Europe but elsewhere. Um, the one thing you won't hear about in the New York Times is the rise in anti-Semitism in, of all places, Israel. I know that's hard to believe, but well, Arabs are Semites, and based upon a book I've been reading that's really fascinating and is a really courageous story written by an author by the name of Max Blumenthal, Goliath, Life and Loathing in Greater Israel, the anti-Arab racism that the Zionist regime is responsible for in Israel is mind-boggling. It's inculcated into the educational system and the IDF, and it's become so rank. But thankfully, there seems to be a large and growing peace movement in Israel, although their numbers don't seem to be too large. More and more people seem to be challenging the narrative that they've been sold by the various governments there. And of course, a lot of supporters of Israel see it as, they kind of compare it to what we did to the American to our indigenous population. Of course, they're absolutely correct. But one doesn't necessarily justify another. But back to this issue of anti-Semitism and some interesting little factoids in Mr. Blumenthal's book, Goliath, Life and Loathing in Greater Israel. Um, this aspect of anti-Semitism in Israel takes an even stranger turn when he talks about the number of young Russian thugs who have skinhead types who have either claimed to be Jewish and immigrated to Israel, or didn't claim it and somehow have ended up in Israel, and they have these street gangs that torment the ultra Orthodox there, painting swastikas on synagogues, and it got to the point where it was so bad that the government could no longer ignore it. And according to Mr. Blumenthal, a lot of this has to do with the demographic factor and the obsession that the regime in power there has with this idea of sooner or later Jews will become a minority in their own country, and hence the need to import Ashkenazi or European Jews into Israel, and Jews from other areas of the world, but even so desperate as to give the right of return to Russians who are not Jewish. I believe that's correct, or claiming to be, and absolutely aren't. So anyway, it's a fascinating read. The name of the book, once again, is Goliath: Life and Loathing in Greater Israel. And I found out about this book from watching Democracy Now! I saw Max Blumenthal interviewed, and it really is a courageous book for somebody like himself to write. Um, he spent a large amount of time in Israel, and was able to hook up with some very interesting activists there, and they actually went out to certain certain events, such as the expulsion of attacks on the indigenous Palestinian population in the West Bank by the settler population, and he was part of a group, tagged along with a group that went out to protect Israeli Jews that went out to protect these settlers. Excuse me, these, yeah, it gets complicated. These Palestinians who were living on their own land, and he talks about how they got arrested and thrown into, and some of the circumstances here are extremely tragic. For the Palestinians, and it really has seemed to have struck a chord with a number of Jewish activists there in Israel. And I think that this is one positive development that we're unfortunately not hearing too much about these days. And of course, I think there's a great debate going on within the Jewish community in America and elsewhere as to how much support to give the Zionist project now that seems to have run seriously amok. I myself am a supporter of the one-state solution, an end to the apartheid state. I think that the present head of state in Israel, Mr. Netanyahu, and his cohort have basically killed the possibility of a two-state solution in Israel. And that, after reading Mr. Blumenthal's book, I realized that is absolutely the case. There is no possibility of a really viable Palestinian state existing other than the present banistans that they've been granted, and the gangster-ridden PLO headed up by the billionaire Abu Mazen is just a pathetic joke. I think more and more people are beginning to see this as the only real greater Israel project that can ever really exist, an end to the present Zionist setup, and an end to the apartheid state, and equality for all people, and a secular state. And I think the analogy to South Africa is quite good and quite strong, and that model can be used to make the transition. But I don't think that people have necessarily reached the point now where that is that people are getting there, I think, and beginning to see that is the only solution here. And as much as people in America and elsewhere like to make the statement that this is the central issue in the Middle East today, I think that it's really ridiculous to suggest such. It is a major issue. It is a serious issue, but with the one word that you never hear too much of, three-letter word, that filthy three-letter word, OIL, oil, that never seems to get mentioned. The role that Israel plays in basically prostituting itself and its policies to U.S. policy and to the West more generally, and helping to facilitate that, is really the other side of the story that never gets presented. But the real story in the Middle East is oil and control of oil resources by the West, and in particular the U.S. as the country that is the dominant capitalist power of the West. And it's really a form of neocolonialism that the U.S. is trying to reimpose on the Arab Islamic world, in particular the Middle East, where most of the oil resources are. And it's really a catastrophe. It really is. I mean, they have, the U.S. has created so much anger and so much resentment that, for all practical purposes, it suffered a complete loss of confidence, an erosion of any kind of leadership that the power structure here might have ever assumed that it had. The U.S. is, unfortunately, the power structure is carrying out these things, these atrocities, these wars in our name. And that's why it's important for the American people to step up and say we have no interest in these catastrophic events that are creating misery for millions. And this is not in our name. This is in the name of the ruling class of this country, and the class of billionaires and their associated enormous wealth, and the power structure that they elect and put into power through the subversion of the election process. And so, it's important that we step up and say that, let other people know that we're on their side. Certainly not on the side of ISIS, a degenerate group of infantile pagan fanatics, sadistic fanatics who you know, essentially we're armed and trained by the U.S., Western powers, and the Saudis and the Kuwaitis paid for and by the Saudis, Saudi money and Kuwaiti money, Qatar, UAE, and the same ragtag bunch of wealthy monarchical states on the Arabian Peninsula that have really come to the end of the line. These states now and they're really not. I mean, the only thing modern about them is the architecture. I think they've really come to the end of the line, and I think that their actions have revealed just exactly who they are. That these are feudalistic regimes that don't fit in the modern world and aren't going to last too much longer. And they need the military support of the U.S. to keep these hated regimes in power. And I think the same thing could be said for Egypt right now, with the dictatorship that the U.S. helped to install. Well, the Saudis actually as well, kind of like partners in getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood. It was vehemently hated by the Saudis because of its affiliation to the to Turkey and their Islamic party there. Um, so it's a confused situation, and I think that it's important for us as activists in the West to step up and say that these horrible genocidal actions are not taking place in our name. They're being taken. Our misleaders try to involve us with their despicable acts, but we don't want the blood of these innocent people on our hands. And Mr. Obama is really an abomination. And it's hard to understand how so many people can be so easily fooled. But there's a lot of work that goes into his speech making, a lot of research, and he's basically a PR man for the national security state. And it really is pathetic. But I think that better days are ahead. I have nothing but confidence in the American people. I know that we're the sleeping giant of world politics, and when we begin to wake up, things are going to begin to happen. You're saying that with Ferguson, Missouri. You're saying that all over the country. That a new awareness is developing in this country. And it's about time for well, I mean, this is what the situation requires. So I want to thank you for giving me 12 minutes of your attention. I hope this was enjoyable, informative. If not, well, I'll try to do better the next time. I think we all have a responsibility to step up and become more politically involved these days. I hope that you will consider that in your own life. It begins with educating yourself, informing yourself about what is actually going on in our world today. I would greatly recommend the alternative news sources. I think that internet technology has revolutionized the situation and is creating the opportunity for a real thoroughgoing revolution in human consciousness. I'm a daily reader of the World Socialist website at ws.org, but I read many other things as well, including the New York Times. So anyway, thank you for your attention, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.